Hello everyone, this week we are going to learn demand, supply and the market process. These are very important terminologies and please pay attention to the definitions of each terminology while you're watching this video. And we have almost more than 60 slides to cover, so this might be a longer video than the previous ones, but this is one of the most important chapters that set the foundation for the following chapters. So first we talk about consumer choice and the law of demand. Let's start with an example. Think about your local grocery store. Local grocery store is a great place to see economics in action. Literally, millions of individuals from around the world have been involved in the process of getting these goods to the shelves in just the right quantities. Market prices, reflecting the forces of demand and supply, coordinate their actions and bring their choices into harmony. Let's start with the first terminology, law of demand. The inverse relation between the price of a good and the quantity consumers are willing to purchase. As the price of a good rises, consumers buy less. Just think about yourself. When you go to a grocery store, the first thing you check probably is the price. And if the price of a good increases more than you expect, then you might choose some other cheaper alternatives to purchase. So the availability of substitutes, goods that perform similar functions, explains this negative relationship. A market demand schedule shows the quantity of a good people will demand at varying prices. Consider the market for pizza. A market demand schedule lays out the quantity of pizzas demanded at various prices. We can graph these points, that means the different prices and the respective quantities demanded, to make a demand curve for pizza. You see a demand curve on the screen. For drawing a demand curve, you just need 2 points. Remember, to draw a line, you need 2 points, but we have more than 2 points here. This is schedule, which is a table that shows the relation, price, and quantities. At $35, for instance, you have 4,000 of pizza, 35. Okay, you combine these 2 points, right? 35, and then here this 4. This is your first point. And then let's choose 5 and 16, which is your last point. $5, 16,000 pizza. $5, 16,000 pizza. This is your second point. You can combine these 2 points and draw the demand curve. While a straight line is used to depict the demand curve here, there is no presumption that this will be the case. But the only thing we know is that this curve is going to be downward sloping. Downward sloping. This is important, okay? Notice how the law of demand is reflected by the shape of the demand curve. As the good prices rises, you see it's going up and out, and the quantity is going down from 16 to 4, and the prices are increasing from 5 to 10. So when the prices increase, quantity demanded goes down. This inverse relation is called law of demand. The height of the demand curve, this is very important. You see here, for instance, the height of the demand curve here represents that any particular quantity shows the maximum price consumers are willing to pay that for that additional unit. For instance, for the 6,000 pizza, the consumers are willing to pay $30. Okay. So before that, they might be willing to pay higher, but for this additional pizza from 5,999 to 6,000 pizza, they are willing to pay $30. Thus, the height of the curve reflects the consumer's valuation of the marginal unit, this additional unit. For example, when 6,000 pizzas are consumed, the value of the last pizza is $30. Consumer surplus. So what is consumer surplus? Consumer surplus is actually what you think that you get bargain. So for instance, you are willing to pay $10 for a hamburger because you're too hungry, but then you see that the price of hamburger is $6. So this $4 is your consumer surplus. In economics and mathematical representation, consumer surplus is the area below the demand curve but above the actual price paid. So consumer surplus is the difference between the amount consumers are willing to pay, and the amount they have to pay for the good. So you're willing to pay in this example is $10 and you pay $6. So the difference $4 is your consumer surplus. Lower market prices increase the amount of consumer surplus in the market. Let's look at this example. This is the market for pizza. Suppose the market price is $20 and that market price, the market is selling 10,000 pizzas, okay? At $20, the market price, the 16,000 pizza, here 16,000 pizza, will not be purchased because the 16,000 pizza is valued at $5, right? Because the consumer who demands, it's only willing to pay up to $5 for it. The 4,000 pizza, on the other hand, 4,000. So demand curve represents, there are too many individuals here, right, on this demand curve. Every single point here represents a demand. And when you draw a demand curve, you order the people's willingness. So the person on the top pays the highest price. And then you order such that the 16,000 person who buy the 16,000 pizza is willing to pay $5. So this person is not going to get the pizza because the pizza price is 20, his maximum willingness to pay is 5, okay? But the 4,000 pizza is different. The 4,000 pizza will be purchased because the consumer who demands it here, that person, is willing to pay $35 and the market price is 20. So he's thinking that he's getting a bargain. What is the bargain here? $15 because his willingness to pay is higher than the market price. The 10,000 pizza and those that precede it will be purchased because each of these pizzas are valued as much or more than the $20 market price. So we say for the 4,000 person there is a consumer surplus, like here, which is $15. Why? Because he's paying 20, but the pizza his valuing is 35. But we want to know the total consumer surplus. That means there are too many people here and we want to know all of these people who are buying the pizza until and including the 10,000 pizza, what is their consumer surplus? The 10,000 person who buy the 10,000 pizza doesn't have any consumer surplus. It's zero because valuation is 20 and the price is 20. But anybody before that actually has a value and their consumer surplus is this lines. When you think about this whole area, then this whole area, which is the triangle below the demand curve above the market price, represents the consumer surplus, total consumer surplus, consumer surplus of all buyers in this market. So consumer surplus represents the net gains to buyers from the purchase. Now the next thing I want to talk about the difference between elastic demand and inelastic demand. A change in price leads to a relatively large change in quantity demanded. So let's say price increases by 10%, but then the quantity demanded decreases by 50%. You see 10 compared to 50. If that is the case, that means the quantity demanded is very price sensitive. How can be more price sensitive? You can if you have lots of available substitutes, close substitutes, because if the price increases, you can say, I'm not buying this anymore. I have other alternatives, cheaper alternatives. So then you become more price sensitive. Demand will be elastic when close substitutes for the good are readily available. You can find lots of examples for that. Any brand of the cereals that you want to buy in the morning, if the price doubles, maybe you can choose an alternative brand. And therefore you can understand that the demand for cereals are price elastic. In elastic demand, a change in price leads to a relatively small change in quantity demanded. Let's say price changes by 10%, but quantity demanded decreases by 2%. Compare the magnitudes, 10% to 2%. Demand will be inelastic when few, if any, close substitutes are available. A good example is insulin pill. The price of insulin pill increases, but quantity demanded decreases at all or very little. Because you have to use insulin pill for your survival, therefore quantity demanded is very, very inelastic, very insensitive to price changes. So let's see one example. When the market price for gasoline increases from 2 to 4, double the price, the quantity demanded decreases from 10 million to 8 million, for instance. And you see, change in price, change in quantity demanded. It's not too much, right? Because the price doubles, the quantity demanded decreases a little. In contrast, when the market price for tacos rises from 2 to 4, you see again the price doubles. Look how much the quantity changes. 6 million units change. right? 6 million less tacos are sold. And when the demand curve is flatter, that means demand is elastic. When the demand curve is steeper, that means the demand curve is inelastic. So you have a question here that you can think about. And now let's talk about changes in demand versus changes in quantity demanded. These two terminologies sometimes can be confusing. You need to understand well, because in this week's discussion, you need to discuss a news article based on these different terminologies. First, let's start with change in demand. Change in demand represents a shift in the entire demand curve. Change in quantity demanded is a movement along the same demand curve in response to a change in its price. So let's see here. Tablet computers cost $300 each. The demand curve for DVDs D1 indicates that Q1 units will be demanded. So here $300 Q1 units will be demanded. And now when the price decreases, this is the price of the good itself. The quantity demanded increases to Q2. So you don't need to shift the curve because price is here, quantity is here. You move along the curve to reflect the change. So you are switching from one quantity to another. But that's not the story always, because we have other determinants of demand, which is in fact not the price of the good itself. We call them as non-price determinants. Non-price determinants because these are the determinants other than the price of the good itself. Several factors will change the demand for the good, shift the entire demand. For example, suppose consumers' income increase. So consumers' income increases assuming that the prices doesn't change. So at every price now consumers are buying more of the same good. You see at $100 now they are buying Q3 units. At $300 they are buying Q2 units. The entire demand curve shifts. And that's called change in demand. After the shift of demand, Q3 units are demanded at 100 instead of Q2. So a decrease in demand, if a pizza costs 20, then the demand curve for pizzas is D1, indicates that 200 units will be at 20, 200 units will be demanded. If the price falls to 10, then 300 units will be demanded. Now let's assume that you are in a college town and during the summer students go home and the demand for pizzas at all prices decrease. So you have less buyers at all prices. Now at $20, you see, look, quantity demanded decrease. At $10, it decreased too from 300 to 200. So this is the shift of the entire curve to the left. Why is the case? Now the number of buyers are less, which is not the determinant of price. If the price changes, price of pizza changes, you move along the curve. If anything other than price changes, you need to shift the curve to reflect the change in demand. The following will lead to a change in demand. Changes in consumer income, change in the number of consumers, change in the price of a related good. So this can be a substitute good, complement good, changes in expectations, demographic changes, changes in consumer tastes and preferences. You can read each of these in your book. Go and check the sections, but these are all going to shift the demand curve. So a positive change in income increases the demand. More consumers increases the demand. All shift to the right. Demand curve shifts to the right. Change in price of a related good depends on if a good is a substitute or complement. You need to go read the textbook. Changes in expectations. The positive expectations increase the demand, shift to the right. Demographic changes, again, depends on what is happening. A positive change is going to increase the demand curve. Changes in consumer taste and preferences. Sometimes goods become more famous, popular. Diets become more popular. So if that is the case, demand increases. So please check these questions and then answer them on your own. Next, we talk about producer choice and the law of supply. Producers purchase resources and use them to produce output. Producers will incur costs as they bid resources away from their alternative uses. In economics, we don't only count for cash, monetary value of the resources that are used. So we also look at the opportunity cost of production. What is opportunity cost of production? The sum of the producer's cost of employing each resource required to produce the good. Firms will not stay in business for long unless they are able to cover the cost of all resources employed, including the opportunity cost of the resources owned by the firm. So when you look at the business, you might say, okay, there are cash outlays, right? You need to pay for labor, you need to buy raw materials. So these are accounting costs. But there are opportunity costs of using your resources that you own. Let me explain this. Let's say you invest 1 million to the business, to the production. So with that 1 million, if you don't use it for production, let's assume that you can earn 5% annually from any assets in the market. So you're giving up this 5% earning, interest earning, and using that 1 million in the production because you're expecting that you are going to earn more than 5%. If you don't earn more than 5%, you're not making any good economic decision. Okay, that's what we mean when we say opportunity cost of using your own resources. Economic cost of all resources used to produce. Accounting cost usually ignores opportunity cost. So you have 1 million and the accountant will never ask, how much you could have earned if you could invest this money into an asset. None of the accounting is asking. But if you borrow this money from the bank, the interest expenses are in the accounting cost. But if you use your own resources, the 5% interest earning gone because of using your own resources are not counted in the accounting cost. But economic costs include everything in accounting cost plus the opportunity cost of using your own resources. So keys to prosperity, role of profits and losses. Profit occurs when a firm's revenues exceed its costs. Firms supplying goods for which consumers are willing to pay more than the opportunity cost of the resources required to produce the good will make a profit. Firms making profits will expand, while those making losses will contract. Profits are a reward, losses are penalty. Okay. Now let's talk about law of supply. There is a positive relationship between the price of a product and the amount of it that will be supplied. So this positive relation, when the prices are higher, quantity supplied is higher, is called law of supply. So sometimes students find this concept a little bit conflicting, but just think about this way. Let's say you are tutoring. You are in the tutoring business. The tutoring hours is $10 versus $50. Which one you prefer? $50, right? If it's $50, you might actually try to provide more hours for tutoring because it's more profitable at $50, right? So maybe you'll start tutoring not only weekends but evenings and anytime you have time, and you can find a buyer at $50. So as you see, when the price increases, it becomes more profitable, remember, to produce. Therefore, suppliers prefer to supply more to the market. That is called law of supply. Because of this relation, supply curve is upward, right? Different prices. This is market supply schedule, shows the relation between pizza and the quantity supplied to the market. And now as you see, it's upward sloping. At $5 for 1,000 pizza, and when the prices increases, more pizzas are supplied to the market. Notice how the law of supply is reflected by the shape of the supply curve. Supply curve is upward sloping. As the price of the good rises this direction, quantity supplied increases in the market. The height of the supply curve at any quantity shows the minimum price necessary to induce producers to supply this unit. The height of the supply curve at any quantity also shows the opportunity cost of producing that unit. Here, producers require $15 to induce them to supply 6.7 thousandth unit, while they would require $25 to supply the 9.3 thousandth unit. Consider the market for pizzas again. Suppose the market price is 20. The 12,000th unit will not be produced if the price is 20. Because to produce the 12,000th unit, I'm talking 12,000th unit, additional unit, suppliers need $35 of resources. But the price is $20. When they produce that unit, they could be able to sell at $20. So they are making a loss. So this is not going to be produced. This is not going to be produced. This is going to be produced because at that point, price equals to their opportunity cost of producing 8,000th unit. And therefore, the 8,000th unit and all those that preceded will be produced as the cost of supplying them is equal to or less than the market price. Then what is producer surplus? Producer surplus is the difference between the lowest price a supplier will accept to produce the good, which is the opportunity cost of the resources, and the price they actually get. So here, the price they actually get is this one. So the area between the price line and the supply curve represents the producer surplus. So there is one here, right? Supplier cost $5 to produce 4,000 units and sell in the market 20, so $15 of surplus, producer surplus. But this is only for the one supplier. If you want to calculate the whole suppliers who are supplying the pizza to the market at the market price, we need to find out the area of this curve. Okay? Producer surplus represents the net gains to producers from the sales. So again, we have two types of supply curves, elastic supply and inelastic supply. Elastic supply, quantity supplied is relatively sensitive to changes in price. Thus, a change in price leads to a relatively large change in quantity supplied. Inelastic supply, quantity supplied is not very sensitive to changes in price. Thus, a change in price leads to only a relatively small change in quantity supplied. Let's see one example. The first one is the soft drinks market. When the price increases from 1 to 150, you can see that supply increases, even doubles quantity supplied from 100 million to 200 million. Because you can easily speed up the production and be able to produce as much the increase in price, right? But here, the second curve represents the physician services market. So when the price increases from 100 to 150, it is very hard to increase the number of doctors in the market, right? Because they need to get long years of education. So the supply is not that much responsive. So maybe some of the doctors are going to work overtime because the price is higher, because they are making more profit. But still, you cannot have a lot of doctors graduate from the school when the prices increase. So therefore, the service, physician service, is inelastic. So again, you have questions for you here to think about it. And now we will look at changes in supply versus changes in quantity supply. Change in supply is a shift in the entire supply curve. Change in quantity supplied is a movement along the same supply curve in response to a change in its own price. Let's look at the example here. If the market price for gasoline is $3 a gallon, the supply curve for gasoline S1 indicates Q1 units, right? At $3 Q1 units supplied to the market. When the price decreases to $2, then Q2 units. When the price decreases to $1, somewhere here, between Q3 and Q2. So, this is how we can see the impact of a change in price. You move along the curve, you can see how much the quantities supplied change. If somehow the opportunity cost for gasoline producers change, then the supply of gas will change. So if anything other than the price of gasoline changes, you need to shift the curve. Why? This is pure mathematical. Price is here on the vertical axis, but other determinants are not in anywhere on the axis, so you have to shift the whole entire curve to the right or to the left. This is the left shift, a decrease in supply, in order to see the impact of the change on the supply curve. Consider the case where the cost of crude oil, an input in the production of gasoline, increases. Okay, it's not the cost of gasoline, it's an input. Crude oil in the production of gasoline increases. Therefore, it becomes less profitable to produce and supply gas to the market. When it's less profitable, remember, we shift the supply curve to the left. Remember, if it's more profitable, whatever the change is it more profitable? Then increase the supply curve to the right. If it's less profitable, decrease the supply curve to the left. So in this case, we consider the cost of crude oil increases, and at all market prices, we see that supply of gasoline decreases. Now at $2, compare that. Before you were producing Q2, now the companies are producing Q3. The following will cause a change in supply, changes in resource prices, changes in technology, elements of nature and political disruptions, and changes in taxes. You can go read your textbook, but again, the idea is very simple. Think about it. Is this more profitable to produce? If the inputs are costing more, no, it's not profitable, so supply decreases. If it's a good technology, then supply is going to increase. Good technology, cost-saving technology. Like nature, hurricane, it's a negative determinant, therefore supply decreases. If there's an increase in taxes, it's more costly, so supply decreases. Now the next thing we talk about how market prices are determined. This table and graph indicate demand and supply conditions of the market for calculators. The equilibrium will occur where the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. Quantity demanded, okay, equals to quantity supplied. Just mathematically think of that. If two curves intersect, the quantities are equal to each other. If the price in the market differs from the equilibrium level, the market forces will guide it to the equilibrium. A price of $12 in this market. Assume that you are at $12. Mispriced, okay? They don't know and the price is not good. The demand is here, you read from the demand curve, 450. And now let's look at the supply at that price, 600. So what do we have here? Excess supply. So more calculators are produced than people could buy. And if that happens, what's going to happen? There's going to be a downward pressure on the prices. The prices are going to fall down. When prices are falling down, the existing firms are going to reduce their capacities to produce calculators, and some of the firms are going to leave the market, not be able to survive. And supply is going to go down, and while the prices are going down, the demand is going to increase. You see, supply is going down, demand is going to increase until the equilibrium is reached. Let's think about again a mispriced good in the market, $8 this time. And if it's $8, let's read the numbers. At $8, quantity supplied is 500. Quantity demanded, on the other hand, is 650. This time we have excess demand. You might think about there are lines in front of the stores to buy the limited calculators. So this case is called excess demand, and there's going to be an upward pressure on the prices. The prices are going to increase. While prices are increasing, the existing firms increase the capacity. New firms are entering to the market. Quantities are increasing while the prices are increasing. And at the same time, the demand is decreasing. Some people who do not value to buy a calculator more than $8 are going to leave the market until we reach this point, right? At 550 units, we have the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. So a price of 10 in this market results in quantity supplied of 550 and the quantity demanded of 550, resulting in market balance. When the market is in balance, there will be an equilibrium present and the market will clear. At every price above the market equilibrium, there is an excess supply and there will be downward pressure on the price. At every price below market equilibrium, there is an excess demand and there will be upward pressure on the price. At the equilibrium price, quantity demanded and quantity supplied are in balance. So let's try to understand economically if the market equilibrium is efficient or not. Okay, let's return to the market for calculators. When the market is in equilibrium, where quantity supplied just equals the quantity demanded, price equals $10. Recall that the area above the market price and below the demand curve is called consumer surplus. Here, the blue triangle represents consumer surplus. And here, the market price line and above the supply curve is producer surplus. Together, two of them represent net gains to consumers and producers of the product, which is total surplus. When the equilibrium is present, all of the potential gains from production and exchange are realized. Now, let's just think about whether anything before the equilibrium quantity is economically efficient or not. So, it is economically efficient to undertake actions when the benefits of doing exceed the cost. So let's think about the consumer who wants to buy the 405th calculator. He is willing to pay $12, right? This is his maximum willingness to pay, remember. And the producer who sells that calculator is going to produce that calculator at $8 a unit. So the benefit is $12, cost is $8. So there is a benefit here. There is a net gain here, right? Benefit is greater than cost. So does it make sense from an economic efficiency standpoint to use resources to supply this unit? Yes. Why? Because you are spending $8 to produce this unit and this consumer is willing to pay $12. If the market price is $10, this consumer gets a benefit of $2. It's a bargain for him. And this producer is making $2 of profit, which is a benefit for the producer too. So this, in terms of economic efficiency, yes, you should produce this 450th calculator. Now let's think about the case here, 650. At 650, the consumer who is willing to buy 650 calculator values it $8. And the producer who produces this calculator spends $13. Let's say this one is $13. So does this make sense? No. Why? The benefit is less than the cost. Why? Because the consumer values it 8, but producer spends $13 to produce for a value of $8. So this trade shouldn't happen, right? This trade shouldn't happen because it's not economically efficient. Therefore, any quantities after the equilibrium price is not efficient. Any quantities before the equilibrium price are efficient. Therefore, all the trades up until including the equilibrium quantity are efficient. So at equilibrium output level, the 550th unit, the consumer's valuation of the marginal unit and the producer's opportunity cost of the resources necessary to bring that unit to the market are equal. In equilibrium, all units valued more than their costs are produced and the potential gains from production and exchange are maximized. This outcome is economically efficient. Again, you have some questions here you can answer on your own. And now the next section is how markets respond to changes in demand and supply. When demand decreases, the equilibrium price and quantity will fall. When demand increases, the equilibrium price and quantity will rise. Let's see this. Let's understand this with an example. Consider the market for eggs. Prior to Easter season, the market for eggs produces an equilibrium quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. So let's see that you are here before the Easter. $1.6 Q1 is produced. Every year during the Easter holiday, the demand for eggs increases, shifts from D1 to D2. Why it's a shift? Because remember, if anything changes other than the price of the egg itself, which is here in this case Easter, shifts the demand curve. An increase in demand represented by a right shift. So you are going to shift the demand curve to the right. Right is this direction. What happens to the equilibrium price and output level? Since the only thing that changes here, Easter, right, shifts the demand curve from D1 to D2. You're not shifting the supply curve. None of the non-price determinants of supply is changing, okay? So the new equilibrium is going to be the intersection of D2, new demand curve, and the existing supply curve. So what happened here? Let's start from the beginning. First, Easter starts, demand curve shifts from D1 to D2. But at that existing price, 160, there is an excess demand. Demand is here, supply is here. So there's going to be an upward pressure on the prices. When the prices are increasing, remember, you move along the supply curve. You don't shift the curve. And the supply moves to the new equilibrium. Why? Because increase in demand has an upward pressure on the prices. When prices increase, you move along the supply curve. So the new equilibrium is $2 with the quantity of Q2. So what happened? Because of an increase in demand, both prices, the equilibrium price, it was 1.6 before, now it's 2. And the equilibrium quantities, it was Q1 before, now it's Q2 increase. Both P increases, Q increases. And when supply decreases, the equilibrium price will rise and the equilibrium quantity will fall. When supply increases, the equilibrium price will fall and the equilibrium quantity will rise. Let's see this example. Consider the market for lemons. Initial equilibrium is present where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. We are here. 0.2 and Q1. Suppose adverse weather reduces the supply of lemons. Okay, again, we are shifting the supply curve because weather is non-price determinant. Okay, we shift the supply curve to the left. Remember, it's a parallel shift and left is this direction, right is this direction. An increase, you shift to the right. A decrease, you shift to the left. When you shift the supply curve to the left, you reach to a new equilibrium, a higher price and lower quantity. But what happens? Let's see. For the existing demand, okay, it's here. If the supply shifts, look what happens. You don't have enough good for everybody. So therefore, this excess demand creates a supply, a upward pressure on the prices, right? Because you don't have enough supply at the existing. So there's going to be an upward pressure. So first what happens? Supply decreases. And now there are not enough lemon for everybody. Therefore, there is going to be an upward pressure on the prices. Prices are increasing. While the prices are increasing, look what happens. Demand is going to go up, move along the demand curve. You don't need to shift the demand curve. Remember, demand curve doesn't shift when prices change. So there's always one factor affecting the demand and supply in these analyses. Supply shifts to the left because of a non-price determinant. Then you will find the new equilibrium by the intersection of the new supply curve and the demand curve. Because of that, the new prices are higher and new quantities are lower. And there are questions here for you to think. And finally, this is the last section of this chapter. We talk about invisible hand principle. Invisible hand, the tendency of market prices to direct individuals pursuing their own self-interest into productive activities that also promote economic well-being of society. This direction provided by markets is a key to economic progress. Adam Smith highlights the role of self-interest and the invisible hand of market forces in the following passage. Every individual is continually exerting himself to find out the most advantageous employment for whatever capital he can command. It is his own advantage indeed, and not that of the society which he has in view. So we are self-interested individuals, so we find the best price, right? That's what he wants to say. But the study of his own advantage naturally, or rather necessarily, leads him to prefer that employment which is most advantageous to society. So when you follow your self-interest, you do the best for the society. He intends only his own gain, and he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand. Here, invisible hand he refers to is the price mechanism, to promote an end which was not part of his intention. So prices, communicating information, up-to-date information about the consumer's valuation of additional units of each commodity. Without the information provided by market prices, it would be impossible for decision makers to determine how intensely a good was desired relative to its opportunity cost. Price changes coordinate the choices of buyers and sellers and bring them into harmony. Price changes motivate economic participants. Suppliers have an incentive to produce efficiently at a low cost, to earn more profit, remember. Entrepreneurs have an incentive to both innovate and produce goods that are highly valued relative to cost. Resource owners have an incentive both to develop and supply resources that produce high value. And in order to have economic prosperity, we should have competitive markets. The forces of supply and demand lead to market order, low-cost production, and economic progress. One statistics, the current market price of a particular good or service provides buyers and sellers with what they need to bring their actions into harmony with the best possible information on the current actions and preferences of others. So the pricing system coordinates the choice of literally millions of consumers, producers, and resource owners, thereby provides market order. So the efficiency of market organization is dependent upon competitive markets and well-defined and enforced private property rights. You have some questions here, and finally, this is the end of chapter 3. Thank you.